You're listening to Elevate, a thought leadership series brought to you by CORE and hosted by Dan Cassera.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Elevate, the new thought leadership podcast series brought to you by CORE Group. Today's interview is with Mark Springer. Mark is the president and CEO of Dayspring Restoration in Missoula, Montana. He's also the current president of the Restoration Industry Association, the property restoration industry's largest trader association. Mark is someone I've known for almost 20 years. He is someone I think very highly of. He's not only a brilliant guy and runs a very successful operation, but is always focused on doing things with the highest amount of integrity, and really is someone that I think the industry should continue to watch. I really enjoyed the interview I had with Mark. He's someone I've admired for many, many years, and I'm thrilled to have had the opportunity to have this interview with him. So with that, please enjoy this interview with Mark Springer, and let me know your thoughts. I was talking to my team yesterday, and we talked about the fact that there were so many times where I could have left restoration, because I didn't own a restoration company, so it wasn't like I was necessarily tied to day-to-day operations of a restoration company. So I could leave at any time. And I realized what kept on drawing me back was the fact that the industry needed better leadership. And there were these leaders in the industry who I admire and I have personal friendships with, you included, who I think are doing such great things for the industry. And I think that I just thought, God, someone needs to elevate this industry. And that's kind of like our guiding thing with what we're doing with CORE is like we set out to do new things and we say, is this going to elevate the industry? If it's not, then it's not worth our time in doing. And so it's been kind of fun. So we called this Elevate, and it's really just a chat, you and me having coffee, just virtually, just a chat on what it means to be a leader in this industry, and ultimately what leadership means to you. So that's what this is all about. So thank you, Mark, for being here today. And thank you for doing this. For those people who are listening in, I have Mark Springer, president of Dayspring Restoration, also president of the Restoration Industry Association, and someone who I'm very excited to have this call with. So thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure, Dan. And it's a real honor to be here on this podcast with you. And obviously our relationship goes back a long time, and we've both seen our professional journeys take a number of different turns and twists, and glad that we're still involved together in such a dynamic industry.
Likewise. So, so let's talk about the industry first, because I honestly set out to get to know Mark better. And it's funny because, like you said, we've known each other for a really long time, and we've we've seen each other sort of change in various roles. And I wanted to start talking about kind of how you got into this industry, like how you got started. Like for those who don't know the history of Mark Springer and Dayspring Restoration, like where did that come from? How did you get into this?
Well, I didn't have a choice. I was, I joke around that I was indentured servitude in my dad's company. He started Dayspring Restoration here in Montana, in Missoula, Montana, which is in the far west region of Montana, which is a pretty big state in the mountains, little college mountain town. And that was 1989. So I was 11 years old in 1989. And I remember the very first fire damage project that my dad had was actually some friends of ours who had their home burn up. It was kind of like he started the business, and then boom, he had a customer with someone that he knew. And I had this job of cleaning all the toys. These people had quite a few children, and I had to clean all these smoke damaged toys. And I was like 11, 12 years old, something like that. And I just remember I was like, I can't believe my dad started this business. I'm here in a bathtub. This is, again, either 1989 or 1990. And it's full of black water that's gotten black from smoke from all these toys. I'm cleaning toys in a bathtub. And I really don't think this was like a great decision that my dad made to start this company.
You're like, there are laws against this. Why am I doing this?
Yeah, no, I'm sure there was multiple child labor laws that were violated. But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, the industry was so different then, Dan. I mean, it was, late 80s, early 90s. Things were so different on so many different levels. And, it's a good thing that we are where we are today. One of the other early memories I have of working with my dad was in one of the other kind of galvanizing experiences was a sewage backup in this home that's like 9 inches of the most raw sewage you can imagine. I mean, any restorer has, seen this, where it's like totally raw, nasty, nasty sewage. And I'm like, the fact that we're still alive is amazing, because I mean, we're wandering around in this basement. I've got rubber ankle boots. So the sewage is going over the top of these things. I'm pulling out. I'm probably around 12 years old. I'm like, this place, this whole basement just is the worst smell you can imagine, and we're in sewage pulling carpet out, right? And no PPE, no respirators, no Tyvek, no. I mean, I'm wearing these rubber gloves that are shredded. They're getting shredded on tack strip. And I'm getting all these bloodborne pathogens like right into my bloodstream, right? I mean, this is the kind of horrifying now to think of. It's like amazing to think
it made you the bionic man. Like,
I'll tell you what. I had one heck of immune system through my teen years. I never ever got sick because we were doing these super reckless things. We didn't know any better. I mean, this was a whole different era for the industry, and and so that's how I got into it. Very humble beginnings. My dad operated the company out of his basement for roughly the first 10 years, or not out of his basement. His office was in the basement of our home, and then in his garage, he had like a 3-car garage. And one bay of his garage, he had, this van, carpet cleaning truck, and some restoration equipment. And it was really, really humble beginnings. If you'd asked me when I was growing up, what do you want to do when you grow up, I would have said anything but restoration work. It was, I just saw it as this really nasty, dirty job, and I was kind of always on the front lines of the dirty, nasty stuff. And it wasn't until I got older that I started to realize that there was this incredible opportunity in this industry, and my thinking went from field labor to entrepreneurial thinking. And that's when you've got a light bulb on the screen. Probably the light bulb clicked for me and came on as to what the opportunity was.
So do you think that so was that something that, I'm curious if that was so I too come from a family business. Unfortunately, I didn't stay in the family business, but so you have these kind of interesting dynamics when your parents are the entrepreneurs, not you and I have that in common. A lot of my friends' parents worked for, AT&T and these random corporate companies. So they don't really know what it means to hustle, as an entrepreneur. And so do you think that your dad, and I don't know if you ever had this conversation, did he set out to turn this into what it is today, meaning with you at the helm, or did it just kind of, or did you figure that out on your own? I'm curious because in my family business, I have brothers who went down that path. I, in turn, decided to make my own path. But I still have that hustle that I think you're kind of innately born with, right? When you have parents who are entrepreneurs. So, but I'm curious, did your dad very much, was it by design? Did he plan on saying, okay, one day Mark's going to have this epiphany and he's going to go, yeah, no, this is where I want to be. Do you remember that happening? And do you think that was something he set out to do?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dan. I think that the way that evolved over time, and kind of that metamorphosis that happens when you go from, being in a business to understanding that, this thing's either going to own me or I'm going to actually operate a company that is going to be a professional company. That is definitely a process. It doesn't happen overnight. My dad's vision for our company was very different from what it has become. I think he always thought that it was possible that one of his children may at some point take it over. But that was never something that was really imposed on me. I think the thing that was imposed on me is that he really wanted me to understand the value of hard work, and that was valuable. I mean, I didn't see it that way like most teenagers. You have all the answers, but don't understand the questions yet. And I took that away. I think that was really his goal. Um, my dad's view of what Dayspring could become was, essentially a business that could provide him a living. And I remember once when I asked him when I was probably 16 or 17 years old, like, Dad, what do you think this business could become? Because I was wrestling with what do I want to do? And at that point, I wanted to be an attorney. And I actually won a internship at a law firm out in Washington, D.C. And I went out and that was right out of high school, worked on Capitol Hill for a while. And I remember before I left, before I went out there, I'd asked him, what do you think this could become? And he was like, well, I can see this business, supporting a couple families and, being, having a couple of employees. He didn't ever have full-time employees when I was growing up. I mean, his kids were his employees. And so, fast forward to today, to 2020, we have, 130 different families across Montana that Dayspring, provides their livelihood for now. And so, being a multi-locational, we now have 6 locations across Montana. And I think the infrastructure and the scope and the scale of the operation is something he would have never, ever envisioned. But we've been blessed to grow that. And there's been obviously a lot of phases and plateaus and pieces of that journey over the last, really 20, 22 years since I came in as a partner that we've grown through, and but very different than I think anything he would have ever envisioned.
Yeah, I know it's amazing. The initial few interactions I had with him when I first met you, there was definitely a sense of I just remember the first interaction I had with both of you and having just this really interesting sense of, like, I don't want to call it, I don't even know if I have the right word to articulate, almost like calm and sort of knowing that you were both very just firm in sort of your understanding of what it took to kind of get a business to sort of the next level. And it's interesting because I've had several conversations with you over the years where, like, I have personally seen, I've never told you this, but I've personally seen where I go, wow, I just don't know, like, how does, where I've learned, I've literally had a conversation not related to leadership at all, where I've hung up and thought to myself, I think I'm a better person now because I think I actually get what Mark, what Mark does in the sense that not Mark as a, restorer per se, or as just a general, businessman, but rather I actually felt as though I learned something from that conversation because I notice with you, you're always looking to better yourself. As a business person, as a human being, you're constantly striving to, like, do better. And so, what do you do? There's clearly been areas in every leader's life, there's these areas where you kind of, I don't want to say hit a plateau, but where you just go, okay, I need some help. Like, where does Mark Springer go, when he needs help? And you've clearly grown as a person since you decided to say, yeah, no, I'm going to commit to this industry. That was one of my questions. Like, do you feel like you've grown since you've started? Clearly you have, because it's natural through the kind of the growth process. But, like, what do you do? Like, what's one thing you would tell an up and coming leader if they were looking for, that time where, because it can be a very, as a very lonely seat to be in when you're the boss. You can't exactly lean on the person sitting next to you because that person is you again. I mean, it's your spouse in a lot of ways. Your spouse takes a lot of the brunt of the, I don't know how to handle this, or I don't know what to do with this employee. But, like, what do you do as a leader? Like, and what do you do to grow?
Hmm. Well, first of all, I mean, I think that's pretty high praise, Dan, and I don't know that any of that praise is deserved. I always am mindful of, I think, as as leaders, we always have to really guard ourselves about. Sometimes we take ourselves more seriously sometimes than we should, and I am mindful of and cognizant of and certainly give God the glory for how this path has evolved as we've been on it. But for me, I think the biggest thing that has been critical along the way is being to really to be able to learn from failure. I have learned so much more from things that have not went well, from things that have not went according to plan, from things that were really miserable experiences than I think I've ever learned from any of the successes. In fact, I think the successes often that we have create sometimes a certain sense of complacency or apathy that's dangerous. And there's this sort of I've used the word with some of our management team of constructive paranoia. I think sometimes that is, as we as business people have success, we can start to rest on that. And I think we have to challenge, and I challenge our team, and they do a good job of challenging each other and challenging me to be able to look at areas in our business where we know we have chinks in our armor and really get serious about addressing those. And it comes down to our planning in our organization. And, I think a lot of businesses let circumstances drive what they do or the decisions that they make. And so to be able to step back from that, and as leaders to be able to cast vision with our teams to what we want to become and where we're going, what does this look like within the kind of construct of the big picture and the big kind of final goal or goals we're trying to get to. That's really what's important. And I think that usually always is forged in the crucible of our failures and things that aren't going well. And so, when this happens, and I don't think it ever ends. I mean, I think no matter where we get to, there's always just, in some ways more risk and more, the things that happen when they go badly, it's like they go badly on a bigger scale. I mean, when you have 5 employees, if something doesn't go right, the stakes are different than they are when you have 50 or 100 or more people where those decisions impact, the ripple effect is much larger. So, for me, I guess it's looking at when we face these challenges, how do we learn from them? And then how do we put the people and the resources in place when we identify these areas where the business has to evolve, or we have to improve, or we have to get better, to be able to deal with that. And I think that's what separates successful organizations from ones that don't see success is when you face those critical junctures, how do you either from a strategic standpoint or a resources standpoint overcome that and move forward? And that's I think been one of the real things that, as I just look back over the last 25 years, I can point to all these milestones where I say, this point here, I didn't know how we were going to get through it, but I found these people or these resources, or they were provided to me, and I embraced them to move past it and to learn from that episode.
I love that. No, very well said. I love that. I love the notion of looking, sometimes, we have to stop and look backward and realize and give ourselves credit sometimes even for the fact that, when I said what I said to you, by the way, I said it in truly in the sense that it's a true story. Like I've literally had conversations where you have given me a paradigm shift that I was not expecting. We were talking about something random, just random conversation about something that maybe you and I were both interacting about, something about, my previous organization or whatever. And you have this way of really giving folks a paradigm. And so I appreciate that about you. It was the big reason why I said I need to, have this conversation today. And so I love the notion of looking back. I think that that's really, really important because you can really recognize like how far you've come, but then still be able to look forward and go, okay, now what do we have to fix? And I love how you said, looking at our failures or looking at really where your problems lie instead of just basking in kind of what's worked well. Because you're right, people can become very, very complacent very quickly. And trust me, I've been there. It has happened multiple times. We all have. You're right. Yeah. So I'm curious, when you, as an organization, I mean, especially with multi-location, that's got to be super challenging. How do you communicate your vision across the organization? Like, how does that happen? Like from you at, we'll call it headquarters, to, a technician who's, 5 locations away. Like, how does that happen? And then how do you encourage them to communicate those same vision, or values across, to keep them consistent? Because that's always a challenge I've noticed. And it always has been for me, especially being over like a franchise organization or like a network type of organization. Getting people to take that vision and run with it in the same direction is always a challenge. But how do you do it each and every day?
So I think there's 2 elements to this that really resonate with me. I mean, the first one probably is making sure that what we're communicating about, or what our vision that we have for our organization, is shared amongst all the constituents that we have across the spectrum of the organization. So, there's probably a challenge. I mean, I think we see this really in some profound ways across our nation right now, as we kind of face multiple challenges, with whether it be with social unrest or with a pandemic that we're in the middle of right now. There's leadership that happens by edict, and it doesn't end usually very well, because it's just one person's perspective that's essentially being forced on a much larger group of people, and that usually doesn't seem to end well. So for us, we have really intentionally involved people at all levels of our organization in what the shared vision looks like that we're driving towards. So I think that's really step one, is involving people at all levels in that vision, and then how it's being communicated across the entire organization gets to step 2, which is these kind of multiple levels of cadence for that communication. So from a leadership team standpoint, we have a strategic planning session where, the word strategy and strategic and stuff, I mean, it's probably gets overused a lot, right? And it might mean different things to different people. But for us, our leadership team, from really the key management level, meets every 90 days or around every 90 days, and we revisit how are we executing according to our plan. And our plan really starts with the big picture. What are we all about? This is the vision and mission of our company, and what are the big goals that we have that we're trying to drive toward. For example, in our company, one of them was around a revenue number. It's not the only goal we have, but I'll just speak to the revenue one. We had set a goal back when our company was somewhere around 10 million in size, to get to 20 million in 2020. So to get to 20 million in Montana, I mean, we're talking about we got a population base here, Dan, of about 500,000 people spread across a real big state. So, 20 million from 500,000 people
requires strategy, like a real strategy.
Yeah, it's like, sometimes, and there's pros and cons here, because, if you're in Chicago, you've got 5 million people to go out and build a strategy as to how we're going to do $20 million in revenue there in that marketplace. And you can extrapolate that based on a bunch of different assumptions, and 20 million is pretty manageable. 500,000 people with 20 million is, takes a fair amount of head scratching, because it's a lot of revenue from that population size, as you well know, as experienced as you are in the industry. So, that breaks down into a whole bunch of different strategies in a whole bunch of different areas and a whole bunch of different verticals. And we got to hit on all cylinders in a whole bunch of different ways in a bunch of different markets to do that. And so we have a very regular routine to where we're constantly fine-tuning from a management level that strategy. And then that breaks down then to across our 6 locations, a daily communication that's happening with the key people in those locations, so those key team members who are able to actually execute that at the ground level. And then we're communicating with the entire organization no less than once a month about how we're doing in this. And a lot of it's happening electronically. It happens on things like Zoom, where we're getting our entire organization together to talk about how this is happening. Now, through COVID, we've really been challenged with this, and we had to make some adjustments. We met with the entire organization every single week, and we want to hear from them. We want to talk with them about, what are you experiencing? What fears are you facing? Because we all are facing fears on various levels. So, what are you facing, and how are we as a company making sure that we're taking the steps that we need to take to get through this? And so, that communication cadence, Dan, I mean, this, and you probably see this in the organizations that you work with. The organizations that struggle are the ones that struggle with communication. And so the intentionality that's required in communication, not only how you're communicating and the frequency there, but then what are we communicating about, has to really be focused around those most important things that are really the lifeblood of the organization. And you talked about core values. I mean, that's one of them. We want to honor and recognize the people that are really executing on those core values consistently in that communication, and encourage them and honor and recognize them for what they're doing in that. And that just sets the tone across the whole company.
No, that's great. So you do set time aside. One of my questions was, you do set time aside, specific time, to sort of cast not just vision, but really to connect with, and it sounds like you do. And like you, COVID certainly did that for us as well. I mean, we're a much smaller organization right now. And so it was easy for us to do, but I think that, now is the time more than ever for leaders to really step up their communication game. Because the ones that sort of remain silent are the ones that, are, gosh knows what they're doing. I don't know. But so you do set time aside, which is fantastic, to really connect with your team. And I love the fact that you two are checking in, are you okay? Because everyone involved who's impacted by what's going on in the world right now is impacted even on such a personal level that, you can't expect them to come to work and leave that at home, because, by the way, you're dealing with it at home too. So to be able to level with them and say, hey, your president and CEO is also dealing with the same things you are, the same fears, the same concerns about getting to the grocery store with the masks and all of that other stuff. I really like the fact that you're taking the time to really connect with them, because I think that in the end, I believe, just makes you so much more of just a strong, well-coiled, if you will, or that's a bad word, organization where you guys are really in lockstep with each other, because they will remember that, in my opinion, when this is all said and done. So that's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it really gets to the key. For us, one of our core values is alignment, and alignment is so critical, I think, in especially the workforce that we have now. There's a lot of discussion, and there's a lot of platitudes about millennials and what millennials want, what they don't want, and some of it I think is maybe overstated. But what we know for sure is that if someone is going to disconnect from an organization, it's going to happen because they were out of alignment. They were not connected with, and they did not feel authenticity from the people that they were reporting to, or that they were being managed by. And, as leaders, we can try to, have this brave face that really lacks authenticity, and people just don't buy it. I don't think that they admire it. I don't think that they believe it. And, it's not that our fears are always the same. You're right. There are some of the fears that we have that are the same, but as an entrepreneur, some of my fears are totally different than what some of our team members' fears are.
Yeah.
But when I can express to them that, hey guys, I'm scared right now. I might be scared about some things that are a little different than what you're scared about, but we're all scared, and we've got to figure out, how do we address the fears that we have in a way that takes action? we can all agree and we can move forward in alignment to deal with those issues.
No, I love that. No, good point. Good point. Your fears are very different depending on the seat on the bus that you sit in. Um, Let me ask you. So, if you aside from, I know some of the things that you do to sort of help yourself grow as a leader, but what are some of the things that you do to sort of step out of your role for a minute and ensure that you're continually growing and beyond just what most people say, which is, I read really great books. I mean, so what are you doing to sharpen your saw? Like, what does Mark Springer do? And if a young leader, someone who wants to be in your role, in 5-10 years or whatnot, like what would be one thing you would tell them that they should do continually to sharpen their saw?
Mm. So I think that one of the things, and there's obviously there's a lot of different elements to this, but I guess two that I would just highlight. One is, as a leader, you have to invest in yourself in not just gathering information, but in being able to recharge your batteries and to be able to really be present in the work that you're doing. So, I think any really effective leader or any effective thought leader, so to speak, would really point back to the fact that you have to have times where you're able to stop, and you have to be able to, in kind of a moment of being not in the moment of all of the operational effort and energy that it takes to really drive a company. You get your greatest insights and you get your greatest epiphanies when your mind and your body are at rest. And so, there's a lot of ways people do that, whether it's prayer, whether it's meditation, whether it's just silence, the obvious things like vacation and breaks and stuff like that. You have to have time every day, I believe, that is intentionally on your routine to stop and regather where you're at. And some people, it's not part of their life, and they just get ragged and they get totally burned out, and it's not healthy. And I think that every person that I've had in my life as a mentor and someone who's been able to pour into me, and there's been many of them, that's a common thread. They all talk about how important that has been, that rest and that rejuvenation is. World-class athletes, they get into a funk when they overtrain. And it's usually what a lot of athletes will identify as the breakthrough for them is when they learned how to not overtrain and how to integrate rest into their routine, that they actually had a breakthrough to take their profession, whatever it was, whether it was, being a professional basketball player, golfer, whatever it is. That was the big driver for them. So I think that's really, really, really critical as the first one. The second one I would say is having really good outsight in your life. And for me, I'm a part of a group called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. This is a group of people who are not in the restoration industry. They're entrepreneurs who have successful businesses. We get together once a month. It's kind of like an informal board of directors where I've got guys. I've got a guy that's a manufacturer. I got a guy that's a retailer. I have a guy that's a big, huge, like high-end contractor, a guy who owns a worldwide marketing agency. And we're kind of like a mini board of directors for each other. And we take one day in every single month where we reconnect on what's happening in your business, and we explore issues that we're facing with shared experiences. And that's where a lot of breakthroughs happen. I think every person has to have people like that in their life who can help them see the forest for the trees, and be able to pull back from it and be able to get those insights that are valuable. And for me, what's so helpful is having, in some cases, I have a lot of restorers, for example, I'm super close to, and I get tons of business insights from. But it's good to also have people who challenge our thinking, because as restorers, sometimes we have this self-limiting thinking. We think, this adjuster situation, that's never going to change. And I go, okay, well, is it? And does it really? And that's what the value of like YPO has been, is that I have guys that say, why do you guys do it this way? And I go,
Well,
that's
and
a really
likely
good
because
question.
there are people outside of your industry who can see it from an entirely
Totally.
different lens, which is beautiful. That sounds fantastic.
Huge,
I've
huge
heard great
insights.
things about YPO, and that you just confirmed that. I was always concerned about the fact that, having folks who were not in your same, space might be challenging. But I really think that, from what I've heard, including from you, is that that organization is less about the industry specific challenges and more about the organizational challenges, communication challenges, leadership
Mm.
challenges, of overcoming those things. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And one of the beauties of YPO is that when we connect, you really connect on three different levels once a month. One is the business, obviously. The second one is the family. So talking about, we know our families are really the legacy that goes way past probably our businesses. So, how are you honoring and investing in the relationship with your spouse and your kids and your parents and your brothers and sisters, and the people that are really important in our lives? And then the last area is, how are we connecting personally? And that's, are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking care of your body? Are you taking care of your, what you're putting in your body? What are the things that are influencing you right now in your life, and are they really sort of developing the person that you want to become? And we all develop habits in our lives at certain points that aren't healthy, and that accountability to make sure that those habits don't become things that destroy us are really, really important. And having that accountability in those areas has been very impactful.
I love that. That's fantastic. So I'm going to ask you one more question. I think, because I do respect your time, and I want to make sure that I know you've got a lot to do, but I want to talk to you about your role with the Restoration Industry Association, and the fact that you're the current president of Restoration Industry Association, and how that has, how that's helped you as a leader, and secondly, how it impacts you in ways. And I'll give you an example. I imagine, and I can only imagine, that the way that you operate and the challenges that you come across, day to day at Dayspring, don't always, parallel or speak to the challenges that come across as being the president of, the largest industry association. Because as the president of the largest industry association, you're ultimately wearing the hat of many restorers, not just yourself.
Mm.
And so, like, what do you find that you do things differently, or you're an incredibly authentic person? So I don't imagine you're very different in the way that you sort of place a lens on your decision making. But do you find that sometimes you have to sort of shift the lens, like you're a different version of Mark Springer, when you're the president of RIA versus when you're the president of Dayspring, like, or are you playing the same role? Like, does that make? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think I kind of get what you're asking. I guess I would say there are some areas where I have to be able to see through a different lens in that role. Dayspring is a company that has, because we live in a rural state and we operate in a rural state, I have the luxury of approaching some of the business challenges that we face differently than probably someone in a metro area. I'll give an example of that. So many companies right now in the restoration industry are hugely dependent on program work.
Yeah.
I mean, that is like one of the big drivers for their business. And so they spend a tremendous amount of their effort and their energy in compliance, in trying to find ways that they can be better in their compliance, more efficient in their compliance, and perhaps even exceed the norms of their peers so that they can get more work. And in my company, we don't do any program work. We do 0% program work. And that's a product somewhat of a couple things. One is the strategy that we've had for a long time to be that way. And then the second part of it is because of the state we live in. I mean, you'll remember from, previous roles that you've been in, Dan, that, in Montana, there's just not a ton of claims volume that goes through programs.
Right.
And so I've got just a different reality. So I have to be, as much as that's the way my company operates, you know, I have to recognize that that's not how the entire industry operates. And I have a lot of concerns about restorers and the kind of how we've gotten to where we are today as an industry.
Me as
And
well. Yep.
yeah, and I know you share those, and that's part of, I think, the premise behind what CORE is. And I really applaud a lot of the steps that you've taken to improve the restoration ecosystem. But I do have to look at things differently, and it's hard, and it's challenging because, you know, I told someone before, maybe it was even you, that, you know, if I had known what we were going to face in the restoration industry in 2020, with COVID and, you know, a few other things, and someone had said, "Hey, would you be willing to be the RIA president in 2020?" I would have probably said, "No, thanks."
Hmm.
It's tough. It's super tough right now. I mean, for example, with RIA, one of our biggest pieces of our association is our annual convention, and I don't know what we're going to do this year. I mean, getting people together in large groups right now is a pretty, you know, far off prospect, you know, and so that is going to create all sorts of challenges that we have never faced in our 74-year history. And now I got to face them on my watch. I mean, I don't think that's anyone would necessarily want that, but we've got so many great volunteers. I mean, I know we're going to get through it. It's just going to be really challenging. And then on the other side, I still got a company with 130 people that I'm responsible for at the same time. So, you know, it's super challenging. It's very dynamic. One thing I love, Dan, is that, you know, CORE shares a lot of the same goals that RIA has. It's interesting. You talk about elevating the industry. We had a strategic planning session for RIA back in February, which seemed like a whole different world back at the first week of February.
Oh, I imagine, yeah.
And we kind of tweaked some of the things in our mission and our vision and our core values, but our mission now is three words: educate, advocate, elevate. So we share the same thing, and the ways that we want to elevate the industry are in really the partnership now that we have, which was really a groundbreaking partnership with IICRC to develop career pathways for people that enter this industry. This has been one of our Achilles heels as an industry, is that we really don't have a way for someone who enters this industry to understand what that path looks like. And we've frankly got some perception problems as an industry.
Great. Totally agree.
And we don't think that those should exist. And so, you know, those issues we are addressing through the advocacy part. This industry has lacked a voice. You know, we want CORE, we want a bunch of the big players to participate in this aligned voice for the industry that speaks the same language. And for far too long, this industry has been fragmented, and it has been, in some ways, I don't mean to be overly dramatic, but, you know, we've cannibalized each other in some ways.
That's a perfect word for it. We are so competitive with, you know, holding our piece of this puzzle that I think that organizations fail to realize that, you know, rising tide, you know, the notion of really binding together is really the way to grow these organizations. And we see it here. We've approached some of our competitors and said, hey, I realize we directly compete with you, but we see opportunities here where we should actually sync up, and you do what you do well, we'll do what we do well, and let's find a way to do that together. And you know, guess what? We may actually get larger market share, you know, together. And the funny part is a lot of them are they don't know how to take that because they're not used to notion. Yeah, and so I love that RIA. Yeah, oh, totally. And I love that RIA. One of your board members actually told me that, and I thought, God, you know, I love the fact that they too are looking to create that sort of new lens for the industry, and that we can do this together, you know, and really raise the industry up in such a dramatic way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, you know, it's a big challenge because, you know, we got to where we are today over decades. and a lot of things were happening that I think we didn't realize that the end game was not going to be in our best interest.
Right.
And so, now we've got to kind of get together to solve some of these problems, and we're making some great strides. But one example, Dan, is
but we don't have decades though, Mark. That's the difference.
Exactly. So we got to fix some problems quickly, that have taken decades, and we don't have decades to fix them. We've got a shorter time period. So how do we move that needle? And one example is with Xactware, RIA is having some very high level discussions right now with them, and there's a briefing that I'm hosting every other week right now with Mike Fulton. In fact, tomorrow, which is June 4th, we'll have a discussion with Mike Fulton again about how does this industry really advocate for practices and for procedures and for norms that are in the restorer's interests. And we've got to unwind some stuff that's been a problem for a long time. And it's hard because, like, when I'm having these discussions with Fulton, I feel the weight of the whole industry on my shoulders, and that I don't want to screw it up for everybody. But it's, people have to engage with that, and they got to make their voice heard. And it's not going to be perfect, the outcome. We've got to find areas where there's middle ground, and we're going to have to compromise some of these things. We have to approach pragmatically. But the contractor's voice has to be heard. And I can tell you, like for Xactware, for the first time in decades, they are hearing an organized voice from the industry, and it is impacting the decisions that they're starting to make for the first time. And that's huge. And we got to have people engage with that.
No, that is huge. Mark, thank you. Thank you, not just for your time, but sincerely, thank you for what you do for the industry. I think that I know I can speak on behalf of many restorers who I know personally, who I engage with, who I communicate through social and all of that, and watching, just know that the industry appreciates all the hard work you're putting into it. And this is not as a way to blow up your ego, but I think that you do need to hear that. I think you need to know that you're doing a great job. And I think that it's really important that, that someone, outside of your maybe your core group tell you that, it's the impact of what you're doing is being felt. We certainly feel it over at CORE, and we appreciate it. And anything that we can do to help, elevate that mission with you, we're right there. So, so thank you. Thank you for being on today's call, and thanks for making this happen. I'm glad we could finally sync up to make this work. And I'm excited for people to hear this, because I think this is, not a lot of people get a chance to sit down with really great leaders. And this is actually my new favorite part of my job, to be quite honest, is just being able to connect with people on what makes them tick and how we together can better this industry. So thank you.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you, Dan. It's just an incredible honor to be here on your podcast, and certainly an honor for me to be able to be involved and to give back in an industry that has given me so much. And I hope that as people, from CORE and CORE's members, really find that this message resonates with them. I tell folks all the time, if we can leave this better than we found it, then we know that we did something of value. And I hope that vision resonates with the folks at CORE.
100%. Thank you, Mark. Have a great day. And thank you so much again for your time. We really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, Dan. Anytime.
Okay. We'll chat soon.
You've been listening to Elevate, a thought leadership series. For more great talks with leaders who are making a difference and positively impacting our world, tune in to our next episode or visit CORE Group at gowithcore.com.